Daniel Harper woke up feeling weak and confused, covered in bruises, and lying next to a corpse. Sarah Collins had been missing for weeks, and now her body was found in Daniel's bed. What happened that night? This is the shocking story of obsession, survival, and a terrifying secret that no one saw coming. Daniel Harper was a man who lived a quiet, solitary life on the outskirts of a small town. Known by neighbors as hard-working but distant, he kept to himself, rarely socializing or drawing attention. One cold, late autumn evening, Daniel went to bed early, exhausted from a long day at his job. No one expected anything unusual until the next morning, when everything changed. Daniel woke up feeling strange, a heavy weakness in his limbs and a burning ache all over his body. His head was pounding, and when he tried to sit up, he was overwhelmed by dizziness. Bruises, dark and strange in shape, covered his arms and chest. Panic slowly crept in as he struggled to understand what was happening. He tried calling a friend, but couldn't reach anyone. His breaths came shallow and fast. Realizing he needed help, Daniel somehow managed to call emergency services before losing consciousness. At the hospital, doctors immediately took him in, but the mystery deepened. His vital signs were unstable, and despite running every test they could, no clear cause emerged for his sudden decline. His injuries looked like he had been in a violent struggle, but there was no explanation or visible wounds beyond the bruises. The medical staff was baffled by his condition. Meanwhile, police were dispatched to Daniel's home after paramedics reported strange details from the scene. When officers arrived, they found Daniel's front door slightly ajar. Inside, the living room was undisturbed, almost sterile in its quietness. But then, as the officers moved toward the bedroom, they discovered something no one was prepared for. On the bed, lying unnaturally still under the sheets, was the body of a woman. The discovery sent shockwaves through the investigators. The woman was pale, cold, and showed no signs of life. The room had no signs of a break-in or struggle, which raised immediate questions. How had this woman ended up there? And why had Daniel been sleeping beside her without anyone knowing? The body was carefully examined and taken for identification. Soon after, the woman was identified as Sarah Collins, a local resident who had been reported missing 3 weeks earlier. Sarah was well liked in the community, and her disappearance had been the subject of growing concern and rumors. Her family and friends had been searching desperately, hoping for answers that never came until now. The police launched an urgent investigation, treating Daniel as both a victim and a person of interest. Why had he not called for help sooner? How could he be in such a condition without alerting anyone? Was he involved in Sarah's disappearance, or was there a more complicated story behind the shocking scene? Neighbors were questioned, but no one reported hearing anything unusual the night before. Surveillance footage from nearby cameras began to be reviewed, revealing blurry images of a man dragging something large late at night near Daniel's home. The image matched Daniel, but the mystery of what he was carrying remained. The community was shaken by the grim news. The quiet man who lived at the edge of town was suddenly at the center of a terrifying story. A man who woke up feeling sick and bruised, only to be discovered sleeping next to a dead woman no one expected. No one could imagine how one night could lead to such a dark, puzzling event. As investigators worked to piece together the timeline, questions multiplied. What had really happened in Daniel's home? Was Sarah's death accidental, or was something far more sinister at play? The answers were buried deep in shadows, waiting to be uncovered. And for Daniel Harper, the nightmare had only just begun. Sarah Collins had been missing for weeks before her body was found in Daniel Harper's bed. Her disappearance had left the small town unsettled. Sarah was known as a kind woman who worked at the local library, someone who smiled easily and had few enemies. When she vanished, people whispered theories. Had she run away? Was she a victim of foul play? No one had answers, only a growing sense of unease. The moment the police confirmed the body found in Daniel's home was Sarah's, the investigation shifted into high gear. Her family was notified, and their shock rippled through the community. For them, the news was both devastating and confusing. How had Sarah's life ended in such a mysterious way? And why was her body in a stranger's house? Detectives began piecing together Sarah's last known movements. On the day she disappeared, Sarah had left work as usual but was never seen returning home. Security cameras outside the library captured her walking down the street, alone, looking calm and unaware of what awaited her. After that, all traces vanished. As the investigation progressed, officers discovered Sarah had recently reported feeling uneasy about someone watching her. She hadn't shared much, but a co-worker remembered Sarah mentioning a man who seemed to follow her around town. At first, the police thought it might be a coincidence, but when Daniel's name appeared in the footage dragging something heavy near his house the night Sarah disappeared, a chilling connection was made. Despite this, the exact nature of Daniel's involvement remained unclear. He had no criminal record and was known as a quiet man, not someone who drew attention. What could have driven him to bring Sarah's body home? Or was it possible he didn't know she was dead? The police searched Daniel's home carefully, looking for clues. They found a small notebook with scribbled notes, some describing Sarah's daily habits and routines. This discovery suggested Daniel had been watching her for some time. The obsession hinted at something darker than a random crime. It suggested planning and fixation. Meanwhile, the town grappled with fear and suspicion. People who had passed Daniel on the street wondered if they had truly known the man next door. Rumors spread quickly. Some believed Daniel had harmed Sarah. Others thought he might have tried to save her. The truth remained tangled in mystery. In the days following, forensic experts examined Sarah's body to determine the cause of death. Early results were puzzling. There was no clear evidence of trauma or violence. It was as if Sarah's life had slipped away quietly without a struggle. This finding only deepened the mystery. How had Sarah died? Why had Daniel not called for help if he found her in distress? Questions mounted, and every answer seemed to lead to more confusion. As the investigation continued, detectives uncovered a possible third figure, a stranger, seen near Sarah's home in the days before her disappearance. This new lead opened another chapter in the case, suggesting Sarah's story was far more complex than anyone realized. The town watched closely as the police worked tirelessly to unravel the truth. Sarah's disappearance and death were no longer just a tragic story. They were a puzzle with pieces that didn't quite fit, and at the center of it all was Daniel Harper, whose silence and injuries only raised more questions about the night that changed everything. The deeper the investigation went, the clearer it became that this was not just a missing persons case. It was a web of secrets, obsession and fear, one that would shake the town to its core before the final truth emerged. As the investigation into Sarah Collins' disappearance deepened, a disturbing side of Daniel Harper's life began to emerge. What had once seemed like the story of a quiet man caught in an unfortunate situation started to unravel into something far more unsettling, an obsession that had quietly grown beneath the surface. Police reviewed hours of surveillance footage and discovered something chilling. For months before Sarah vanished, Daniel had been following her movements around town. He appeared in the background of security cameras near places Sarah frequently visited: the grocery store, the park, even outside the library where she worked. These glimpses painted a clear picture. Daniel was watching her closely, tracking her daily routines with an intensity that went beyond casual interest. Detectives uncovered Daniel's notebook, which contained detailed notes about Sarah's habits and schedule. He had recorded the time she left work, the routes she took, and even the people she spoke to. The pages revealed a careful and obsessive mind, focused entirely on one woman. It became clear that Daniel had built a private world where Sarah was the center, a world no one else knew existed. Neighbors and co-workers had never suspected this hidden side of Daniel. To them, he was simply a reserved man who kept to himself. But the evidence suggested that beneath that quiet exterior, he was consumed by an unhealthy fixation. This realization sent a wave of fear through the community. How long had this obsession been growing? And what did Daniel plan to do with the knowledge he had gathered? The obsession also raised questions about the night Sarah disappeared. Was Daniel's intention to harm her, or had something gone terribly wrong after he approached her? Police began to speculate that Daniel might have believed he was protecting Sarah or rescuing her from some unseen danger, but his secret obsession made the line between protection and control dangerously blurred. Adding to the mystery was Daniel's condition when found in the hospital. His body bore bruises and injuries that suggested he had been in a violent struggle. Who had he been fighting? Was it Sarah, or someone else connected to the dark story unfolding behind closed doors? The discovery of surveillance footage showing Daniel dragging something heavy near his home the night Sarah went missing was particularly disturbing. It seemed to confirm that he was involved in the final moments of her life. But the question remained: was he the cause of her death, or a desperate man caught in a nightmare he never wanted? The town's perception of Daniel shifted dramatically, from a quiet neighbor to a man obsessed with a woman whose life ended in mystery. This change fed into the growing tension and fear. People began to look at their surroundings differently, wondering if others harbored secrets as dark as Daniel's. Meanwhile, detectives worked tirelessly to untangle the twisted threads of this case. They interviewed friends, family, and anyone who might have seen something unusual. Slowly, a picture began to form, one of obsession, loneliness, and desperation. But even as pieces fell into place, the truth remained elusive. Daniel's silence added to the frustration. He refused to speak much about what happened, leaving investigators to rely on clues, evidence, and careful deduction. The obsession that Daniel hid was both the key to understanding the mystery and a warning sign of the dangers lurking beneath ordinary lives. It revealed how fixation can turn a normal person into someone capable of unthinkable acts, or lead them into a nightmare from which there is no escape. This chapter in the story was a turning point. What once seemed like a strange accident was now clearly part of a much darker tale, one of control, fear, and the terrifying power of obsession. And the town waited anxiously for the next twist to unfold. Forensic experts worked meticulously to uncover the truth behind Sarah Collins's mysterious death, and what they discovered changed the entire course of the investigation. Initially, the case seemed straightforward: a missing woman found dead in a stranger's bed. But the more they examined the evidence, the more complicated and chilling the story became. The first shock came with the autopsy results. Contrary to what many expected, Sarah had not been dead for long when Daniel found her. The forensic team determined she was still alive, though unconscious, when she was placed in Daniel's home. This revelation challenged everything the police thought they knew. It meant Sarah hadn't simply vanished and then died alone. Something else had happened right before she was discovered. The experts found signs that Sarah had suffered severe trauma before losing consciousness, bruises and cuts that suggested she had been attacked or restrained. Yet, curiously, no definitive cause of death was recorded at that moment. The medical findings suggested that Sarah's life had hung by a thread, and timely medical intervention was critical. This new information raised urgent questions. If Sarah was alive when Daniel found her, why hadn't he called for help immediately? Why had he stayed with her instead of rushing her to the hospital? His bruises and injuries hinted at a violent struggle, but who had inflicted them? Detectives began to explore the possibility that another person was involved, someone who had caused Sarah's condition and perhaps was still out there. This led to a new focus on a mysterious figure seen near Sarah's home days before her disappearance. Witnesses described a stranger lurking in the shadows, watching Sarah from a distance. Could this individual have been her captor or attacker? The police traced this lead, searching for anyone who matched the description, but the trail was cold. Meanwhile, they found that Daniel had tried, in his own way, to care for Sarah. Items in his home suggested he had been attempting to help her survive. There were water bottles, blankets, and signs that he had tried to keep her comfortable despite his confusion and fear. As investigators dug deeper, they uncovered a possible explanation for Daniel's silence. Psychological evaluations suggested he was overwhelmed by shock and trauma. The experience of finding Sarah in such a state had broken his ability to think clearly or act rationally. His injuries, they concluded, could have resulted from a desperate attempt to protect her or fend off an attacker. This twist turned Daniel from a suspect into a complicated figure, a man caught in a terrifying nightmare who may have tried to save a life but failed in the chaos. It painted a picture of a person haunted by fear and confusion, trapped between horror and hope. Sarah's survival depended on the hospital's swift response after Daniel was found. The doctors worked tirelessly, fighting to pull her back from the brink. Her condition was fragile, but the medical team's efforts offered a glimmer of hope in an otherwise grim story. The town was left grappling with new questions. If Sarah was attacked and kept alive by Daniel's presence, who was responsible for her initial suffering? How had she ended up in such danger in the first place? And what had truly happened during those final hours before she was found? This discovery reshaped the entire case. What started as a straightforward mystery of a missing woman had evolved into a complex tale involving fear, violence, and a desperate struggle between life and death. The real story lay hidden beneath layers of trauma and confusion, waiting for the final pieces to fall into place. For the community, it was a chilling reminder that evil often hides where no one expects it, and that sometimes survival depends on the most unlikely heroes. The dark night that changed everything was far from over. The truth was still unfolding. Sarah Collins's slow journey back to life became the focus of the town's attention. The doctors in the hospital worked tirelessly to stabilize her, knowing every moment was critical. She had suffered terrible trauma, but against all odds, she showed signs of recovery. Her survival was a small light in an otherwise dark story, a story that had shaken the town to its core and left many questions hanging in the air. The investigation into what had happened to Sarah and Daniel did not stop with her awakening. As Sarah regained consciousness, she struggled to recall the terrifying events leading to her disappearance. Her memories were fragmented and clouded with fear. But the bits and pieces she managed to share helped investigators paint a clearer picture of the nightmare she had endured. it became apparent that Sarah had been kidnapped by a man she did not know. Someone who had kept her captive in a hidden place outside of town. This stranger had been watching her for weeks, tracking her every movement much like Daniel had, but with far darker intentions. When Sarah had tried to escape, a violent confrontation followed, leaving her unconscious and severely injured. Daniel had stumbled upon Sarah in that critical moment. Whether by chance or by fate, he found her and tried to help. His injuries were the result of the struggle with the captor who attacked him when he tried to intervene. Despite his silence and confusion, Daniel had done what he could in a desperate situation. He had brought Sarah home, hoping to protect her until help arrived. With this understanding, the community's view of Daniel shifted once again. He was no longer simply a man of questionable character, but a tragic figure caught in a harrowing ordeal. Yet, the scars of suspicion did not vanish easily. Many still questioned why he hadn't sought immediate help, why the corpse had been found in his bed, and why he had kept Sarah's condition hidden for so long. Authorities intensified their search for the stranger, the true perpetrator behind Sarah's kidnapping and attack. His identity remained unknown, and the fear of him still lurking nearby haunted the town. The police warned everyone to stay vigilant, and the sense of safety that once defined the quiet streets was shattered. Sarah's recovery was slow and painful, both physically and emotionally. She faced long months of therapy to heal from her injuries and the trauma she had suffered. But with each day she grew stronger, determined to reclaim her life and help bring justice. Daniel too faced his own battles. Though he was not charged with any crime, the ordeal had left deep psychological wounds. He struggled with guilt, confusion, and the weight of public judgment. Friends and neighbors looked at him differently now, with sympathy, fear, or suspicion. His life had been forever changed by the night when everything went wrong. In the end, the story of Sarah and Daniel was a stark reminder of how fragile life can be and how quickly ordinary days can turn into nightmares. It revealed the dark power of obsession, the hidden dangers lurking behind familiar faces, and the unpredictable ways people react under extreme pressure. Went to hospital after sleeping with corpse is not just a tale of crime. It is a story of survival, fear, and the complicated nature of truth. It leaves us questioning how well we truly know those around us, and how sometimes the darkest secrets remain hidden until the most unexpected moment. For the town, the nightmare was over, but the memories remained, a chilling echo of a night that changed everything, forever.